Well, it was one of the most unlikely PGA Tour victories we've seen in recent memory. Nick Dunlap winning the American Express, the first amateur to win on the PGA Tour since 1991. For much more on this performance, now joining us is Bob Weeks. Bob, just how impressive was this win?
I mean, this is really hard to kind of put into perspective because it happens so rarely, only 3 times since 1956. And Phil Mickelson was the last guy, of course, we know that, in 1991. And you put in a couple of things here. First of all, the Saturday when he shot 60, that's just mind-blowing. And the second is going down the stretch with 2 Ryder Cuppers, 2 legends in Sam Burns and Justin Thomas, 2 really good players, and you just hold your head up and let them crumble beside you. I mean, it's just really something that's it's hard to kind of wrap a bow around it right now because we don't really know what's going to be next for him. But what he did there is a remarkable achievement.
It was certainly so much fun to watch Nick Dunlap throughout the weekend. That 60 on Saturday was quite simply pretty awesome. Now, I mentioned Phil Mickelson off the top, and Mickelson and Dunlap will be connected for quite some time. Mickelson, like I mentioned, of course, the last amateur to win on the PGA Tour. But Bob, in your mind, which win was more shocking? Mickelson at the 2021 PGA Championship or Dunlap this past weekend?
I think you got to give it to Dunlap. I mean, as old and as past maybe his prime as Phil was, he was still a really good golfer. And there's lots of things that you can sort of point to and say, well, it came out of nowhere. And yeah, Phil's win did come out of nowhere. But nobody expects an amateur like this to come through in a field like this and win this championship well. Guys like Sam Burns are self-destructing beside him. You know, they're both remarkable achievements, but to me, the surprise factor, the shock factor, is bigger with Nick Dunlap than it is with Phil Mickelson. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but to me, it's 1 and 1A, to be perfectly frank with you. But I do think that Dunlap is his win, just to me, is a little bit more impressive and a little bit more surprising.
Well, given it was the first amateur win in 33 years and the way he did it, it was certainly amazing to see for Nick Dunlap coming down that stretch, getting the victory in the way he did. Now, there's been a lot of money talk in the world of golf in the last couple of years in particular. Dunlap, of course, didn't get the $1.5 million check with the winning performance. That went to Christian Bezuidenhout, who came in second. But, Bob, I think it's just a matter of time before Nick Dunlap is going to be collecting a lot of checks. When do you see him turning professional?
I see him turning professional for Pebble Beach, which is a week from when we're talking right now. I honestly think he's going to make the immediate decision. He gets into that tournament because it's a signature event, and he's qualified for all that. I just want to go back to that $1.5 million you were talking about, that check. You know who really lost out? Not Nick Dunlap, but his caddy, Hunter Hamrick, who usually gets 10% of the purse, right? When a caddy wins on a PGA Tour event or a player wins, you usually get 10%. So the $150,000 going to go to Hunter, who, by the way, also had the best line as they were walking over to sink that little 5-foot putt. Hunter Hamrick didn't want to go out of the way. He didn't want to overpress Nick Dunlap, but he whispered to him and he says, "You know what? Your mother could make this putt." But I honestly think that what Nick is doing right now, is just getting ready to count his money. I mean, he does have an NIL arrangement with at NCAA, which allows that. So they were thinking he was bringing in right now a name, image, likeness, by the way, what that is. It's bringing in around $500,000 based on that. He had some deals with Adidas. He had a deal with True Temper. He had TaylorMade clubs in the bag. So he was bringing in some money. So it's not like he's going home broke. But the money he's going to get from sponsorships, the money he's going to get from winning. And look, let's face it, I would be surprised if the guys from Liv weren't on the phone trying to call him up and say, "Hey, we got a big fat check for you if you want to come play with us." I don't think that's going to happen because he's got so many great advantages right now in terms of playing on the PGA Tour. But no tag days. We don't need to raise any money for Nick Dunlap.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the NIL, Bob. Like you mentioned, a couple of the brands, Adidas, TaylorMade, etc. It was quite a performance by Nick Dunlap. But in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of young players come out and win right away. But generally, they have just turned professionally. Think back to 2019, Colin Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Matt Wolff, those kind of players. More recently, Rose Zhang, Ludwig Åberg too. But the difference here, Bob, is that this guy is still an amateur. But overall, why do you think we're seeing more and more young players have success so early in their careers?
I think they're groomed better. I think they're trained better. I think another thing you're seeing is a lot more athletes go into golf. I think these guys, if you look at the guys like Oberg, and you look at Michael Torborn's son, who's the big guy from Stanford. I mean, these guys are big fellas. Rose Zhang is not a big player, but she is certainly overly qualified to remain as an amateur, and it made sense for her to turn professional. And I just think they have much more skill level, both physical and mental, coming out of amateur golf as opposed to the past. You know, it was very rare back 25, 30 years ago that players would not complete all 4 years of their college program before joining the PGA Tour. And then it was sort of, I can remember, you know, talking to some pros, they sort of said the years between 30 and 38 or 40 were kind of your peak years as a golf professional on the PGA Tour. And you can look back. And the winning age of pros on the PGA Tour, or amateurs in this case, just keeps getting younger and younger and younger. So the difference between the top collegiate players and, say, a middle-of-the-road PGA Tour player is almost nothing. I won't say it's nothing because there's still a lot of things you have to learn to play as a professional. But these guys come out of college ready to win.
Yeah, they certainly do come ready to win, and they're hitting it longer, they're hitting it straighter, they're trained like pros, they practice like pros. We saw Nick Dunlap averaging 331.9 yards off the tee. The guy can absolutely send it. Now, Bob, whether he turns pro or not, we think he will turn pro, but if he doesn't, he's still in many of the majors coming up in 2024. So what's your outlook for this kid for the rest of the year?
All right, let's break this down. If he stays as an amateur, he gets into the Masters because he's the U.S. Open champion. He gets into the Open Championship, and he gets into the U.S. Open. Right now, after having won the tournament, the only one of those he loses is the Open Championship. You have to remain as an amateur to get into the field using that one. But he gets the PGA Championship. He also gets the Players Championship as a pro. He also gets a 2-year exemption. He also gets all the signature events with guaranteed purses, big money purses. So the upside of remaining, or the upside of staying as a pro is very big. So I think you're going to see him, and I think he'll do it very quickly because I think there's lots of money on the table, and the first signature event is at Pebble Beach. I think he'll play at Pebble Beach, and I think he'll play the signature events. I think he'll probably cash in. I mean, you know, listen, we know tournaments incentivize golfers to show up, so I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up at some of the non-signature events as well and plays them and cashes a check. I mean, this guy has got the world at his feet right now, and all he has to do is decide where he wants to play, when he wants to play. You know, we know what clothes he's going to wear. We know what clubs he's going to use. It's really his world. He just has to sort of pick from column A and column B and then go and play. But I think you'll see him play a pretty full PGA Tour and major championship schedule.
Well, it was quite the performance of the U.S. Amateur. It was an unbelievable performance at the American Express, and there's a lot to come here for Nick Dunlap, who went from 4,129th in the official World Golf Ranking to 68th with a victory. And Bob, as we wrap, whether it's Golf Talk Canada or here on TSN, we always talk about the odds. He opened last week with 400-1 odds on FanDuel. A little later in the week before teeing off, his odds climbed to 500-1, and someone decided to place a wager for $300, and they just won, a cool $150,000. Quite a nice way to begin a week. Nick Dunlap, the future is certainly bright.